Hey everyone, this is Louis7, and excuse the mess behind me, but we have some news for the Lord of the Rings Online, and that is going to be on the next update, which is Before the Shadow, the next major update, I should say, which is in the form of a mini expansion here. So this was actually just announced earlier today, right when I'm able to sort of make videos again in a temporary setup here, but we will look at the trailer, but essentially what this is we kind of already knew from leaks that I will get to, but it is two new zones coming in the mini expansion update 34, Swanfleet and Cardolan. Both of these are going to be low-level zones for levels 1 to 32. So this goes along with the theme of a lot of the recent updates in LOTRO where they're adding lower level content. Now, what's unique about this is it's one, going to be a mini expansion, but two, it's also going to have new book quests that focus on actually what happens, as the name implies, before the Shadow, before the Fellowship of the Ring, while the Nazgul is actually searching for the Baggins in the Shire. So once this mini expansion comes out, we will get to see a little bit of the history of Middle-earth before what we have in game right now. Alright, so this mini expansion covers levels 1 to 32, but what about for level cap characters? There has not been much in-game content in LOTRO in a long time, really since the Gundabad expansion and its raid that came out a couple months after the expansion actually released. Well, we will get a new 6-person instance, a new skirmish, which is really interesting because it's been a really long time since we've gotten one of those, and a delving difficulty system that will offer new rewards and challenges. The announcement page doesn't really share much information on the delving system, but I believe it will affect missions and potentially also skirmishes. It seems like it should affect skirmishes if they're releasing a new skirmish. But ultimately, this announcement page is pretty bare bones, and they just say there will be new information coming out later and what incentives VIPs will get and all that sort of usual stuff we see with expansions and mini expansion releases in the game. If you're curious what a mini expansion entails in LOTRO compared to, say, a regular major update or an expansion, it's kind of like what we had with War of Three Peaks. No matter what account type you are, free-to-play, premium, or VIP, you will have to purchase this in some form. We will have more information on that, it looks like, in September in the coming months. There will be, as I mentioned, some incentives for VIPs as we get closer, and they will have pre-purchase available in late September. So it will probably be similarly structured to recent expansions and, of course, War of Three Peaks, where there will be 3 tiers: a basic tier where you get the content, a middle tier that has some nice goodies and cosmetics, and then the ultimate fan bundle, which of course has way more stuff and typically is way more expensive. I do want to point out, I really do like the art here. This is kind of a throwback to actually what I'd consider Shadows of Ingmar Day, seeing the Nazguls running around. And this is of course before the Shadow, but I just thought this was really neat. Also green area, perhaps where Cardolan and Swanfleet are. Now, something I haven't done before but have thought about doing is actually watching the trailer, so let's see if there's anything interesting. It's only 36 seconds, so it's really short. If you want to watch the full trailer, I will link it in the description, but so far not too much interesting, just some ruins and what looked like an elf city. Oh, that's actually pretty neat ruins there. They obviously have a lot of the landscape done if they can show this in the video. And that is it. Okay, so we didn't really see much there. I'm guessing this is either part of the new 4-part book quest that they talked about or instance or something like that. Could even be a part of the skirmish. Now for some more details on the zone than what they actually say in here, because we do have more details and this is based on some leaks that actually happened from the alpha. You may also remember I took a look at what we could see of these zones that we can actually see in game right now. So before I get to the leaks of that, this is actually what you can see in game right now. Again, I made a video on this, don't want to hear myself there. But that is what it looks like where we can see looking from Eregion to the west. That would be towards the Swanfleet area. So if we go back to the announcement, that is Swanfleet and Cardolan's to the west. But the leak from Alpha, that's where all the really juicy details are. This is just somebody, it's Vargheden, I don't know if I'm saying that name right, but on Reddit they shared this of the new maps and context of surrounding regions. So basically connecting the leak of Cardolan and Swanfleet maps into what we have in the game right now. And here is the full version of that. So we of course know Breland, we're familiar with that zone. We know Lonelands, Trollshaws. We have in the east here, we have Eregion, and we go all the way down to Inadoith. That's what we have in game right now. So the mini expansion, the level 1 to 32 area, is going to cover, we have all the way Old Forest and to the east of Old Forest. There's even a connection to the Shire there, which is quite interesting. I don't know if that's like South Farthing or what is going on there, but because it says to the Shire, that's kind of piques my interest right there. But we have the Greenway, which is going to be the road from Southern Bree, where there are the ruins at Andrast, and that actually connects all the way down. You have to travel quite far to get there, but that connects all the way down to the Windfells here in Inadwaith, where there is actually a hobbit village. So before even this leak, there were actually leaks of screenshots of some new hobbit villages, I believe in this area around the old South Road as it has it on the map here, if y'all can even see that. And I also realized there's a potential that my head is blocking the way, but it's mainly covering just what we have in game right now with the Regian and Inadwaith, if you are curious. So the reason I draw the attention to that road is it's a really big connection of what we have in game right now, actually connecting the Andrath area all the way down to Inadwaith and that road that has been blocked off for the entirety of the game. It's really exciting seeing that open, kind of like how Kellendam, or not Kellendam, but Era of the Wind finally opened up to the rest of Middle Earth with the connection to the Shire via the Yonder Shire. So along this road, we do have some areas to the southwest. This will be the Cardolan area. You might remember looting like Cardolan items in Barrow Downs, Cardolan trinkets and the such like that. So that is going to be the Cardolan region here. And then up in the northeastern section of that zone, we have the South Downs, which actually goes all the way up to Lonelands. Don't know if there will be any connections there, but it looks like mountains will block that. That's pretty standard for two zones to be geographically locked like that, but there is a road here, so potentially you could have access from the Forsaken Inn area and the Goblin Ruins down and southwest Lonelands connecting down, and then perhaps some more open terrain where we get to the Angle of Methathel, which is a fairly new zone, southwestern Trollshaws and southeastern Lonelands up there. Otherwise, just a lot going on. Can't really get into too many details. Karanos looks like a pretty large either settlement. I'm not familiar with the name, either being, say, like ruins taken over by evils or actually being a friendly good area. Similar with Tharbad. I know at once that would have been like a friendly, a good people city, but don't know nowadays if it's more ruins and taken over, but still will be interesting to get to Tharbad and the Graveflood River. And then what we could see in the screenshot that I showed earlier, or the video that I showed earlier, the clip, that is actually going to be the marshes that we see on the map here in the southeast. That is going to be Wadewater with Swanfleet, and there will be a new area there with Western Eregion, which is, hey, just west of Eregion, also includes Tham Kellic here, which sounds like an elven city, similar with Karis Gelibrin. Can't quite read if that's a C or G. I think it's a G, which is right next to Tham Mirdain, so that's a little bit odd. It could be the way this map was stitched together with the rest. And of course, going down to Storvales, which is a hobbit area. I believe Store sounds like a hobbit name at the very least. And with the hobbit influence and even Hobbit Village being in Inadwaith, that makes sense that it would be a hobbit area, potentially leading to river hobbits. There has been no announcement on river hobbits, but it seems like it would thematically line up if they released river hobbits, just because there's rivers there and the such. It does seem like it would line up. It's also interesting because the zones are again levels 1 to 32, which would also be perfect to release like a new race and have a new leveling experience for that new race to go along with the mini expansion. But time will tell if that is actually going to be the case. Now, going back to the bigger picture, that is exactly what I want to focus on, how big the new area looks. Again, this could be partially due to how the maps were stitched together, but it looks fairly accurate with how things line up. And this new area is very big, even for level 1 to 32. I know that's a pretty large level range. I mean, we get whole expansions that are sometimes even 5 levels, but 10 levels, typically with a whole expansion such as Gundabad, which was a large area, even going back in the days to like Mirkwood or Dunland with Rise of Isengard. Those are fairly large areas that cover 10 levels, so you would have to have a pretty large area to cover 32 levels, but they're the first 32 levels, which is typically going to be like leveling faster through them. Going to be interesting to see how the pacing is with leveling in this area, with how big it is, and also where the level ranges line up. Like if you're going out of Andrath, is it going to be level 15 content right there? Is it all going to be 15 over in Cardolan? But what about Swanfleet? That connects to Inadwaith, which you might remember in the video where I talked about this area. I actually mentioned that it'd be perfect to cover like an alternative to Moria level 50 to 60. Well, that does not appear to be the case because it's 1 to 32, but what happens when you're right next to Innodoith? Is that the level 32 area? Is that even a level 1 area? Is that like where you start again with River Hobbits? Potentially that is where you could start at Storyvales and head up. Personally, I don't find that to be too likely, but really anything at this point is possible. It'll be just interesting to see how the progression goes. Now, another note, I have talked about the level range and progression a lot right here, but one thing that is quite interesting, if we go back to the actual announcement page, it says questing from levels 1 to 32. What I want to focus on here is the 1. In LOTRO, you aren't really level 1 when you get out of the intro. That's when you get into the real world, when you get into Era of the Wind, when you get into Breeland, when you get into the Shire. All those start after the intro. You actually have to go through the instanced intro, which is not a part of the open world, and you level up a little bit, typically to at least level 5, but it can vary depending on how many side quests you do, and if you do like the intro skip, and if you have XP boost, all that sort of stuff can of course impact it, but it's always greater than level 1. So it's really interesting that they say specifically levels 1 here, because that to me implies that there might be a new intro area where you can actually start at level 1. I don't know if that's the case and I'm just thinking about it a little too much, and they just mean like generally it's hey, when you start the game out of the intro to level 32. Now I feel like I'm a bit rambling. This could be part of just me getting in the process of making videos after a couple months again, but the next thing to cover is the other end of the level range, which is 32. I think it's okay that it's like a very low level region. I can talk about my opinion on that later, but how it works into the game 1 to 32. So right now we have the 3 intro areas, which is Shire, Era of the Wind, and Breeland. Those 3 together can get you about to level 20. And then to level 32, you have North Downs and pretty much Lonelands can get you roughly to level 32 and get you say set up for Trollshaws or Evandom all the way in the northwest of this map. What is exciting to me is an alternative in the level 15 to 20 range, which is pretty much only covered by Breeland right now if you do like traditional leveling pass. So I honestly do think what I'd be most excited for in this entire area is seeing what is level 15 to 20 in this and how exciting it is and how it really compares to Breeland. Alright, so some final notes on the level range of the new zones and the mini expansion. I was honestly surprised that it was 1 to 32. I did not expect a new, like basically new player experience type mini expansion. I know they've been adding a lot of lower level zones and I have seen positive feedback from the community. I've even given positive feedback about the addition of these low level zones, but something I talked about in one of my recent videos and maybe even the last update is, are they doing too much for low levels and not enough for high levels, especially end game, and thinking about like with the Gundabad expansion level 140 content? Now they did mention that they are going to add a new 6-man instance, a new skirmish. How relevant that will be to end game with the current reward system is unknown, because skirmishes are basically, I hate to say this, but skirmishes are basically pointless to run if you're looking for any sort of character rewards. I guess technically if you do grades, you can get seals, which you can get essence reclamation scrolls from, would be the biggest benefit from skirmishes nowadays. But it also depends on the delving difficulty system, how that might impact endgame players with things like missions, skirmishes. I don't know about instances. Again, we don't really know details on this, but I have heard specifically missions and I think skirmishes as well, but less sure on that one. So ultimately, with this being 2 new zones for level 1 to 32, yes, it is exciting to have something new for lower level, but I think even with me not playing Gundabad for a while, I think things have already been stale with Gundabad and just the idea of playing that content with the limited content we have. So that is an issue. Adding a new 6-man instance I think can be interesting, but there's no new landscape content. I feel like that's the big thing that I am kind of getting bored of the idea with Gundabad of. I know my personal playtime with that is a bit odd because I basically switched back to Anor, but now Anor is shutting down and we're going to transferring servers to a live server and going to play Gundabad content. Anyway, setting that aside, I do think that Gundabad is getting stale like landscape content wise as well. So moving forward for the presumably last major update of the year and getting ready for like the spring update next year, is this really enough content to keep players, in-game players, interested in the game and playing? And I of course personally do not know. We'll see how it goes for me, but I think a lot of that depends on the 6-man instance, the skirmish, and the delving difficulty system, and what other maybe micro or smaller updates they do throughout the rest of the year and start of next year. And this of course leads into why are they doing level 1 to 32 content? Why are they doing content that might focus more on new players? And I think it is most likely due to not just like people having positive feedback and of course enjoying that, but I think a lot of it probably has to do with the Rings of Power, and maybe even some of it's from EG7, the parent company that owns the company that owns LOTRO, something like that. But anyway, EG7 and Ad Global 7, I wonder if there's some push from them wanting to capitalize on the Rings of Power TV series that is starting, I believe, soon on Amazon, and potential interest players will have, or viewers will have, in a Lord of the Rings game, and then they find Lord of the Rings MMO, well, there's Lord of the Rings Online, trying to have perhaps a new player experience, so to speak, that people might want to buy into, get that mini expansion and play in the newer area that might have ultimately a better new player experience. I'm guessing that is one of the reasons and motivations to add a low-level zone like this. Alright, I have been rambling for far too long, so let's go ahead and ramble some more about the map. I did want to just look at one more thing. Again, this is the leaks of the 2 new zones coming in the mini expansion, and I wanted to take a little bit of a look at what we can see of the geography. There's not really much here, and with the new map style, it's basically a satellite view of the landscape, so it's not the most exciting to me. It'd be almost more interesting to me to kind of guess what the landscape is like based off of a more hand-drawn type map, but we will work with this. And this looks like ruddy more. I would guess it looks really orange, but that's because the map looks orange. It just looks like orange rocks, green. I mean, it's the greenway, so there's probably a lot of green. You can see a little bit swampy marsh here. That might be more like Iron Hills type. I don't think quite like Iron Hills, but that's the vibe that I'm getting, sort of like that. And of course we get into marshland, so that's pretty simple. Some mountainous, Inadwaith-like landscape going on over here, perhaps oranger trees or more rock exposed landscape like that actually looks a lot like the Angle of Mythathel. Both of those orange rock areas do. Western Eregion actually looks perhaps the most interesting to me, not just because I like Eregion, but it looks like an Eregion style landscape, which I just think is more interesting than kind of the mountainous, hilly terrain that we have on something like the Angle of Mythathel that seems to be present in a lot of these areas. South Downs, yeah, it just looks mountainy to me. I'd have to actually explore that in the game to see how it looks, because sometimes I just don't think this map style does justice to what the landscape actually looks like. That's why this one areas looked a little bit more boring to me. I do think the farm areas in here could definitely be interesting. Keranos and the rivers could definitely be interesting as well, but that's pretty much, I could say that about basically everything here could be interesting just based on what it looks like on the map. There are definitely some interesting bodies of water though. With a little bit of imagination, you could probably think of it as being something significant. Don't know if it's supposed to be though. Alright, so the last big talking point to cover is how this fits broader into the game. So taking a look at a bigger map of the game, this is from KBall78 and Cred. It's not a perfect map, but it's really good at showing how these zones are interconnected and just how everything flows within the game. But what we have coming, it extends basically from the Shire, as I covered, to Inadwaith, and filling in that entire area between the Shire and Inadwaith, including up to Breland, Lowlands, Angle of Mythathel, and Eregion. And how this fits into the broader game is kind of interesting. We cover the level range 1 to 32 and bordering like Eregion and Inadwaith being interesting, but thinking about future updates where they could go from here, does this mean there's interest in almost creating an entirely new leveling path going down? Maybe even you could go all the way up to level 100 and connect an Amplis down to Western Gondor. There are a lot of possibilities there. I don't know if Standing Stone Games' plan is to build on this more. Yeah, here's a better map to show this, but where they could go farther south in Eriador, they could go all the way down to the Anfilis region, connect to Gondor there. We have Dunland right around this area in the game, and of course that eastern area along the western side of the Misty Mountains. But it'll be interesting to see how that could go in the future. Now, the book quests, I mentioned the book quests and how that could be continued later, but thinking about that a little bit more, it's actually the Nazgul searching for Baggins to the west. They're going from the east to the west, I believe, in this. So there might not be all too much potential there, actually. This could just be a one and done type storyline. Either way, I'd be curious to see where we go next, and I am interested in your all's thoughts on where you think the game will go after this update, after this mini expansion, before the Shadow. Alright, I do have to sneak in a little bit more news here, and I have to zoom way in because the LOTRO forums are just not great for reading things in general, but we have somebody who appears to be fairly new to the LOTRO team on Mac Mahal, don't know if I'm saying their name even close to right, but they have made a couple, apparently total of 9 posts, but I can only find 2 of their posts on the LOTRO forums. It could be that they're on like private forums, but anyway, setting that aside, they are a systems designer, and you can see they joined the forums in April this year, so they are fairly new to the LOTRO team, and they made a couple topics on one, the captain class, and another is the warden class here. So they're basically looking for feedback on these 2 classes. If you're interested in sharing that, I encourage you to participate in these and talk about those 2 classes. I have a lot of thoughts on those, but not really much time to write up anything. Another thing to highlight real quick, if we go to the dev tracker, there is one about hunters that actually Orion, who has come back, I think he was working on PvMP among other things, of course, but he also made one about hunters, talking about what like people might want to see in the future. So just some feedback threads for the classes if you're interested in those. Other than that, that is all that I had for this video, and I will of course have more content. It'll probably be a slow ramp up in the next couple weeks, but I'll try to have more content and update on my situation and even my setup I have here. I know it's a little bit ugly behind me, but we will work on that in the future. And I will be planning to do a live stream sometime soon after this video. Otherwise, I hope you all enjoyed the video and learned something useful about the Before the Shadow mini expansion coming to the Lord of the Rings Online. And if you did, please consider liking and subscribing for more, or becoming a channel member to support the content. And thanks for watching, everyone.